Well, you've been listening to some professional singers, but we don't have to go back to the New York Metropolitan or anywhere else to find great singers. We have plenty right here in Minnesota, and we also have here in Minnesota wonderful, wonderful trained singers, choir directors. Minnesota's known for that. I sang in a choir with a student of Emilius Chris Jensen from our beloved St. Olaf, which has a nationally known Christmas program and so on and so forth. I mean, this is a real center of music and singing, particularly Minnesota. And we have one of Minnesota's own legendary vocal teachers, vocal coach, you name it, but a real teacher of voice. Jane Jensen, sitting here right now, right in front of us. And we're going to talk with Jane about the voice and teaching the voice and understanding the voice, and just share some of her experiences over the years of working with singers. And I must warn you, this will be quite a ride, because as we have spoken before about this, but Jane Jensen has trained some magnificent singers and worked with them over the years. And you'll get to know them in this conversation. As a former Miss America in the mix, a leading opera singer, now I think based in Italy, but who has CDs and DVDs out, and who a teaching program in Europe. The list goes on and on and on. But I think at the heart of it is the story of Jane Jensen. So here's Jane. Hi, Jane.
Hello.
Good to see you. Well, let's start at the beginning. That moment, I'm interested to hear for your story. Let's just start at the beginning. At that moment, you began to sing. When were you aware that singing was something that you could do?
Well, my mother sort of told me that I was a singer because she belonged to the church's, Sunday programs. And so she took me to church when I was 3 years old, and I had to sing a solo because I was always singing around the house. Whether they were good or not, I didn't know. But it went on a little bit longer than that, quite a long time. And the more I sang, the more I loved to do it. And so it didn't faze me at all. I never really felt nervous when I was performing, and that makes a difference in a singer. Because if you are frightened or shivering all over, you cannot sing your best, but you feel like you are doing something that someone else will enjoy.
Yeah.
Is that a good beginning?
Nice. Singing around the house, naturally, very, very common Midwestern story. And you want, of course, church. And church, nice thing about churches is people aren't standing around judging your sound or critiquing you in any way. The idea of church is to celebrate the great stories of our faiths, and so we do that all together. And then we, of course, the choirs. Now, I have a hunch you probably got into a pretty good choir at church at a young age.
We did have. It was a Presbyterian church on 3rd Street in Hudson, Wisconsin.
There we go.
And it was, by that time, they knew I was a singer because I had been singing all over town.
Oops, yeah.
On programs.
Yeah.
The women's club, would always have a nice afternoon program, and that's when I first started singing. But from then on, I don't know where to start.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's tough. Well, with that beginning, it's great. And I know a thing that I noticed in my own upbringing was you go to church, and pretty soon you're in the choir. The next thing you know, you're standing at a community church thing of something like Handel's Messiah. And you've got to read the parts. And I remember, it depended whether we had enough altos or we were a little short on tenors. But some years I would sing the baritone parts on some things and the alto parts on others. But you realize that before you're 15, you could sight read an entire classical thing. I could still remember many of the parts from the Handel's Messiah and sing them from memory. And that's many, many, many years ago. So that's a heck of a background to start.
Well, that was my first in a Messiah too. because one of my sister's best friends was a teacher of music, and she said, I want you to sing at my college one. And so that was, I think I was 15 or 16 about that time. And I sang with 3 other professional singers, and I was the soprano.
There you go.
Soloist.
Well, this happens so often in these fields of music, and I'm sure it happens in sports and other fields, that if you're good at it, it kind of shows right away. And you get these experiences. We have them. Well, going forward, at some point, you had an opportunity to interact with a major voice teacher from this part of the country. She'd been around. She'd been in Europe, but in fact, I'm going to let you talk about her, but a woman by the name of Mabel Jacobs. Legendary. Talk about legendary. And as I recall from our earlier conversations, you were very young when you met Mabel Jacobs.
That's when my dad took me out. I was 11 years old. And I didn't know what, to expect or anything because I hadn't met her before. And this lady was over 6 feet tall and very, very direct in everything she did.
Yeah, we're going to look at a picture of her right now as you talk for a moment, and we'll flash that up here. You can see she looks like she meant business. Yes.
But, I got to love her and she got to love me so much that she spent many, many hours teaching me her technique of voice. And that's when I first began to sing exceptionally well, if you want to call it that.
So you notice the difference there. This is always, to me, the interesting place, because we know as professionals that though many young people sing well, have lovely voices and so forth, there's quite a bit to singing, particularly when you get to repertoire and some of the demanding phrases and turns of phrase and range that some of the music that you run into, whether it's classical or sacred music or opera music, and some professional training, particularly in knowing how your body works and how to get the breath going and to where you can, reach those next levels. The impact of some kind of training is pretty crucial. What did you notice the most? You just said it very well, that you really began to feel like you were a singer. What can you think back with Mabel Jacobs and her technique? Can you think of what she did for you as a teacher that was different, that kind of made you grow in new ways?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it happened when I was doing classical music, because I'd started doing it right away, because you have to learn to sing classical music. All right, so she didn't actually say, your ribs are doing it, your stomach isn't doing it, you aren't doing it that way, but if you do a phrase, just like I'm showing you in a part of what she was trying to show me. She had this great big voice. It was the hugest voice that I'd heard in a long time. But anyway, when I heard that sound, and I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to sound like that someday too. And it's one thing that you hear that I just took on. Something happened here, because I couldn't make it this way.
Right.
But I've always sung easily. It was not hard to sing.
Right.
So I had it on top of that, but I had to put the bottom on.
Yeah.
And so that's when I developed a very big rib cage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right out here.
We become more aware, probably that's the place where, say, a young person singing meets a demanding classical piece, like we're going to hear you sing I know that my Redeemer liveth.
We are.
Yeah, we are. We've got it all taped up here. We'll be popping that on as we go forward, because one
I
thing.
didn't think I was going to do it live.
Oh no, we're not going to make you do it live. We've got a recording of you doing it on the radio,
Yes,
and
I
it was,
know.
you know, as you know, we do. But yeah, it's the breathing, connecting the body is not doing. But I'm interested in what you said. I had a similar experience with Larry Day, who was the choir director at Westmar College, where I did my BA work. I was a trumpet major then, but of course we all got in the choirs, and I wound up, I could sing all the high notes, so I got in the tenor section right away as a freshman in the senior choir and toured and all this business. But Larry Day, I had never heard of him before. It was my first day walking around the campus. We walked by the music building, and the windows were rattling in the music building. I said, "What in the world is that? It's going to break or something?" And we stopped, and here was this man singing so powerfully that the windows shook. It was an old building. It all defend the building a little bit. Yeah, that was Larry Day. He went on to Colorado State College, I believe. That's the one in Greeley. I think that's the one he went to. After Westmar founded an opera program, they enticed him out there by saying they were going to start an opera program if he would come out. And he went out there, and some of my friends went and trained with Larry then. But yeah, just being around that big sound, it does affect you in some ways. But like you say, it was not so specific. I took lessons with Larry Day, and he rarely would talk about, well, your jaw is tight, or the rib needs to come in, or do this or do that. He threw repertoire that he designed for me that he thought would work with my voice, and had me do it vigorously and watched carefully, and he worked me. But being around that sound, wow, I could see. Yeah, and Mabel Jacobs had a career. Did she not?
She definitely did. In fact, she was going to be in the Metropolitan Opera, and she was in a hotel in Philadelphia, sorry. And she was staying there overnight. She just back from where she was teaching in Germany, and that was another story.
Yeah, she was in Europe for quite a while.
Yes,
yeah.
but she was there during the German-American War, the first war.
The first one. Oh, the Great War, the big World War I. Oh,
but anyway, in the hotel, she woke up in the morning, and she was just going to start to get ready to go to the opera. What they called then was their prelude to singing. Okay, but she was getting dressed and everything, and of course her size made all the difference in the world. Yeah. She was probably internally nervous.
Yeah, yeah.
She passed out on the floor.
Yeah.
And that was the end of her career.
She never came back from that all the way, did she? It was a pretty serious physical
It was a
breakdown.
very physical thing. Yeah. But she always made good use of what had happened was on purpose.
Well, I guess she probably felt, and I read an article, an interview with her in the newspapers from back in 1986, and she talked about that, and she said, well, she thought, well, for sure, she knew she could teach. She could share her knowledge and understanding of the voice. Apparently, she never got back the full sound she had. If the sound you heard was powerful, it's because I can't imagine what she sounded like on those stages of World War I in Germany. We can only just imagine what that was like.